Welcome back to From the Garoffice with Micah Foster. I'm your host, and today's conversation is with Joe Henkel, the creator, owner of Create Wonder Media down in Riverside, California. He helps people create wonder with media. We're going to talk all about that and why that is in just a moment. So here we go. Here's Joe. Well, thanks, Joe. Joe Henkel from Create Wonder Media for being here today with me on From the Garoffice. And I'm so excited for this conversation. I've been kind of wanting to have this conversation with you for a little bit, ever since I've been kind of following your journey on YouTube. And we were part of a ministry cohort of people trying to figure out how to use, digital media and social media, and specifically YouTube for a while. And so watching you develop and kind of move forward in your own way has been really fun. And so give me a little bit of context. Where are you at? What are you doing? Tell us all about your life.
Yeah. I think we've been connected for probably 2 or 3 years. I think it seems like we started around the same time, where I started on YouTube, and I noticed, you're a fellow believer from Southern California as well. And I started watching some of your videos, and I feel like in a lot of ways, a lot of people in the kind of Christian YouTuber or Christians on YouTube space has kind of developed a lot. So it's been a really fun journey. And there's a Facebook group that we're in. And stuff. So that's been a really fun part of my journey recently. But I guess going back to, I grew up in a Christian home, and I was saved when I was 8, and really developed my faith pretty early on. And I ended up going to Bible college and actually went to seminary for my master's in theology. And around that time, there was just a lot of things that happened in my life. I really felt like, I want to effectively impact people in the world. And I think, and my belief personally, is that I can impact more people doing ministry online and connecting with people online than I can in the church. And I'm a huge believer in local church ministry, and I love and support so many of my friends who do it. And I believe that every believer should be part of a local church and involved. But I just really saw this opportunity, first of all, in terms of reaching people with the gospel. And that's kind of where I started. I started creating poetry videos and spoken word videos, sharing the gospel. Praise God, my top video has hit over 300,000 views. And it's just a short 1 to about 2-minute video called A Poem About Life. And it's been amazing to just, put out some poetry videos and things like that. And then I realized, I kind of felt like I hit a limit at one point. Not necessarily how big I could grow or how much I could reach, but I realized if I want to do this full time, it's going to take a long time to do it as a kind of entertainment based channel. So especially for creatives that are listening, there's a lot of different directions you can go with the content you create, but really knowing your audience and knowing your purpose and knowing where you're going with what you're creating is pretty important. So I kind of realize most of what I'm creating is mostly entertainment based, even though it's faith based and it's trying to share the gospel, right? But people who watch poetry videos aren't necessarily willing to pay that YouTuber money. So I decided I could make a bigger impact if I shifted towards media, and I shifted towards helping people with media. And really around that time is when I went full time on YouTube. I went full time by starting a business around it that's helping other people with media. So that's when I started Create Wonder Media. And so Create Wonder Media is the business that I started along with it. And really, most of it right now is just me doing media projects solo for a lot of people. I have one editor part-time. But really the vision with that is to create wonder. And I believe, especially from my faith in Jesus, that there's so much beauty in the world. And there's so many wonderful things in this world. And as creatives, and specifically as Christian creatives, we can create something that puts a kind of wonder in people's heart. And I think that helps a lot with my clients, where we're trying to market for them and sell for them. But also as believers, the content that I want to create to represent Christ well, to put out into the world, I want to create something that adds a little spark into someone's life. And there's this kind of wonder that comes into people's hearts and see something beautiful. And they're like, oh, there's more to life than just the mundane. There's more to social media than just, people complaining or issues that are just frustrate and kind of drag people down. And as creatives, and especially as Christian creatives, if we can create something that's beautiful, that makes people see, oh, there's something more, there's something better to this life than the mundane, I think it's a great opportunity to share the gospel.
So tell me about how, give me an example of this kind of thing. I mean, I understand the concept, right? So give me an example of how you're executing on that. Yeah,
so it looks different in different niches. So for example, my sister's channel. So my sister, I helped her launch her channel last year. It's called Gloria the Farm Girl. But she's 15 and she lives on my parents' farm in New Hampshire. And it's a very small farm, but she's creating videos teaching people how to, especially young people, how to kind of start a farm, how to take care of chickens, how to take care of goats, how to train your dog and stuff like that. And none of it is necessary. She's a believer and my parents are believers, but nothing necessary in her channel is, you would say, like clearly Christian in a sense that's like, sharing the gospel or anything. But I believe even through things like that, we're representing Christ well. And our job as believers is not only to, I think Matthew 28, where it says, go into the world and preach the gospel, but I also think of the passage in, I believe, Acts, where, or the passage where Paul calls us ambassadors for Christ, 1 Corinthians, where we're ambassadors for Christ. And part of that, our role as ambassadors is to represent Christ well. Jesus said, people know that we're his disciples, that we love one for another, have love one for another. And I think a lot of times when Christians think of Christian creatives, they think of only like content that's preaching the gospel. But I also think content that represents Christ well, that shows, hey, maybe it's making family vlogs where you're just showing that you're loving each other well. And I think of our friend Joshua Verwers, when I just watch his videos or watch his family or like Trey Van Camp, I love his family videos kind of more than his preaching videos, because I'm just like, man, here's a believer who's doing his best to love his kids, to love his family. And that creates some wonder in me. That creates like, oh, wow, this there's some beauty in here. And with my sister's channel, it's like, oh, here's some joy around some basic things, taking care of animals. And like, what's below there? And what represents Christ well, and what leads us to want to know more. I think of someone who's not a believer, right? They're scrolling on social media, and then they kind of stop. They see, you're at a church's 2-hour live stream, and they might look for like 2 seconds, and then they're like, oh, nothing here for me. Keep scrolling. Maybe it's a worship time, or maybe it's a preaching time. But a lot of times, that's not what unbelievers are looking for. They're not looking to watch 2-hour church sermons, but that they stop. And I think of, for example, Trey Van Camp's channel, which some of his best videos are just Disney videos that aren't necessarily Christian centered. And then people come, they watch the Disney videos, and then they stay, subscribe, and then get to watch some of the things that like, oh, this is more about what Christianity is about. So that's really how I see there's a really cool part of YouTube and social media that Christians can tap into and make an impact for the kingdom.
Absolutely. That's awesome. I love that idea that by showing sort of the beauty in life, you create wonder about exploring, in other words, exploring what else is this person about? What else is this brand about? And in that, finding the love, the grace of Christ with further exploration. What's really interesting? My daughter watches YouTube Kids, right? She's 9. She likes 2 channels, really. She likes Tic Tac Toy, if you've ever heard of this family.
I haven't heard of that one.
Okay, this family is a Christian family, but the family, try not to be too critical. The family, everything they do is centered around like sponsored products, pretty much. So they just they're like a toy review channel, but then they create little stories with the toys. But I find it to be very commercial in a way, and it feels like a giant commercial, which I don't feel like is. But she likes it, so whatever. But then there's another family, and this family is a Mormon family that rarely talks about their faith, but does talk about their faith, which I always have to have further conversations about with my daughter, because I'm like, well, it's a little bit different, and here's kind of the differences between what we believe and stuff. But they do a great job at creating just wonder. Like, they're really loving family. They're always, their dad works remotely, so they're always traveling. They'll spend, time in Haiti or something for a few months, and then they'll go to, they were in Universal Studios yesterday, and the one that she was watching, or they weren't Universal Studios. It was San Luis Obispo, and we had just been in San Luis Obispo and been in the same spot. So she was all, "Oh, we were just there."
Nice.
So, anyway, but despite our theological differences and what, the differences between our faith, they do a good job at what you're talking about, which is really creating that wonder and seeing the beauty in life and sharing that with really it's a kid-friendly channel, and they are really loving as a family. You could tell there's a lot of love there. So anyway, I feel like there are people kind of doing that, and my personal channel has been kind of all over the place, experimenting with different things. But where I've landed recently is I just want to put a smile on people's face and share some joy, if I can, from our life. So you mentioned earlier in our you mentioned earlier that you have a part-time editor. So do I. He's my oldest son. He's 11. And so, like, I've stopped editing my vlogs, and I'm just giving him the stuff on an external hard drive. And he's in iMovie. I usually do Premiere Pro. I'm doing all these things, take a lot of time. He's in iMovie. And I'm like, I have to not care as much about all these little things, because I want him to grow in that skill too. And so I I pay him a really cheap rate, keep him motivated, and he'll edit this. He'll be my editor for this. He'll take out any awkwardness or any stumbles I do along the way and kind of smash it together and then give me a final product, and I'll be like, all right, great. And so I love having that, and I love working with him on that. And I'm kind of the executive editor, right? So I go through and do a flyover and say, hey, we need to tighten this up or do this or this, and he gets better every time. I just really love involving the family in that process. So tell me about, like, what kinds of clients do you serve?
Yeah. Right now, and I feel like a lot of businesses are like this, like when they first start, they're just taking whoever will pay them. So right now, but my focus is entrepreneurs and really small businesses, especially ones in kind of educational niches. So like a lot of the clients I have right now are coaches, a finance coach, a business coach who specializes in helping carpenters. And so a lot of the people that I'm helping are people in the workplace, people who are trying to build businesses, especially with the online part. So helping with creating YouTube content and creating their just social media posts on a regular basis.
Awesome. So what is the top social media platform that you're working with for your clients?
Right now, I love Instagram Reels. I'm a huge just fan of it. I love what it's doing for my personal account, but also my clients' accounts. Like Instagram Reels is just consistently performing anything else. It's funny because like right now I just launched my podcast, but I'll get about 15. Right now it's average about like 15 listeners to each podcast episode, but I'll chop that up and post like clips from it, and most of the clips are getting over 1,000 views on Instagram Reels. So
with how many followers does the account have?
So my personal account has like 3,000 followers, and my Reels are again average between like 1,000 and 2,000 views, but that's way better than a story view or a feed view. And I've had a client where he's a pastor, and I'm just posting sermon clips with captions and music and a few engaging elements. And we've got 5 videos to hit over 10,000 views on Instagram Reels in the last month. Wow. That's amazing. Like the people there's probably about 100 people watching between his Facebook Live and YouTube Live and replays on Sunday mornings. But the Instagram Reels, we have about 10,000 people watching every week. And that's just an amazing opportunity that I see right now. I'm obviously, YouTube is my favorite platform. YouTube, I just believe in it. I believe in it for the long term, building a consistent following, being able to sell, being able to impact people deepest. But right now, in terms of just large reach and then kind of getting followers and building deeper, Instagram is a lot of fun right now.
Cool. Yeah, and the attention kind of shifts and swerves, and you kind of have to figure out where's everyone going right now. Mm-hmm. And so that's the spot. It's like the TikTok was still very large, but I felt like that was the spot for a little bit. It goes back and forth. So tell me a little bit. What's your podcast called? Where can people find it?
Yeah, it's called the Create Wonder Show. Just search Create Wonder Show or Joe Henkel or wherever you listen to podcasts. But I interview just creatives and entrepreneurs on their journey and what they're using to grow their business and to make an impact right now. So basically just interviewing lots of different creatives and entrepreneurs on, hey, what's your story and what are some of the tactics that you're using to grow your business online?
Awesome. So recently I sent you someone to possibly interview. Have you talked to this person yet?
Yeah. Thanks so much for that connection. We have a fun interview with Kat Connor Sterling coming out next month. So that was, thanks for, again, us connected. She has an amazing story because she auditioned for a Netflix movie and she sent in a video audition and she got the role right away. So I really enjoyed that conversation. And we were talking a little bit before our passion for just movies and stuff. So
right. So have you seen the movie?
Yes.
It's called A Week Away.
Yeah. So for those listening, A Week Away is a Netflix movie. It's kind of like a Christian musical. And it's really it's very different from what you would typically think of a Christian movie. It was a lot of fun. I love the soundtrack.
Yeah, the soundtrack took me back. It took me back. It has some renditions of kind of Christian songs I grew up with, from artists that were kind of another generation. They're still around, and they have cameos, which is really funny. It's like to kick off their song, they're like suddenly the lifeguard, or they're suddenly a camp counselor or something, which is really funny. That was a fun thing. I watched it with my family this past week and had some fun with it. My wife was, because of all those old musical references and stuff, she was almost embarrassed because she knew all of them. She was like, "This used to be my jam," it was really funny. So it definitely, my brother actually told me about the movie before I even met Kat, and he was like, "Yeah, you would." I feel like it's done differently than most Christian movies. Still pretty overtly Christian.
Yeah. And I think going back to the point of representing Christ well through creativity, I think that movie does it pretty well. I tend to be kind of critical towards Christian movies because a lot of Christian movies can be pretty cheesy. Some might be trying, some aren't even trying. But there's different critiques that we could have, whether they're being cheesy or whether they're just I think represent the message of Christ well. A Week Away did really well. And I would think the best example of a Christian movie is the Lord of the Rings series. Honestly, even though it's not overtly Christian, even though maybe, the business that I run, or I would think of a YouTuber, Sean Cannell, he's a believer, but his videos aren't preaching the gospel. But when I go back to the Lord of the Rings movies and the books, I haven't read the books yet, but specifically the movies, that's a loved series by everyone in culture and stuff, right?
Yeah.
But and everyone knows that Tolkien was a believer, even people who were watching it, people who were really fans of it, and they respect him and they respect the series so much. It's hey, here's a person who really in an amazing way, used his life to represent Christ well. And I think whether that's, through creating a series or a book series like Lord of the Rings, or a movie like A Week Away, or a farm YouTube channel, or a business, that impacts people, or whether you're a truck driver like my dad, who's just, on the road and and hopefully, being able to represent Christ well to the people that you come across. Like, our responsibility is to love people like Christ loved them, to represent him well, and ultimately share the gospel message.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm curious what you think about the Amazon Lord of the Rings series that's going to be coming out.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I'm not going to get I'm not going to set any expectations before I see it. I'll just say that. I think Peter Jackson was one of the greatest directors of all time, and just the cast and the original Lord of the Rings movies was amazing. And obviously it's one of the most awarded, like in terms of Oscars of all times. Like, we're all going to have Lord of the Rings fans are going to have extremely high expectations for it, but I'm not going to set any expectations till I see it.
Now, is it a remake of the story of the books, or is it like a new offshoot?
Yeah, I haven't done any research. I'm just going to like kind of just wait till it's out, not look into it, not think about it, and then like try to go into it with an open mind.
There you go. That's the best. My brother, he had a couple of media jobs after college down in Malibu with a company in Malibu, and they did a lot of commercials, and like cutting together commercials and all that kind of. It was Kurtco Media is what it was called at the time, and they did like trailers for movies. Do you remember the one Dante's Peak? It was a volcano movie. Anyway, he did a bunch of the cutting together the trailers for that and stuff. But he got really burnt out on the industry because he was, for his work purposes, he was having to cut together like commercials for like lingerie brands. And he was like, I can't just sit here for 8 hours a day staring at this stuff. It's going to mess me up. So, through that and through like thinking about pace of life and family and kids and everything, they decided to move up to the Oregon and Washington area, and he pursued a teaching job, and so now he teaches video broadcasting, editing, television. Has a really cool studio at the school, multiple editing rooms. A studio with green screen and all that. And they shoot all the sports events for the district, and they have a public access switch in a closet. He showed me once. He's like, when I flip this switch, we're live. So he's got a really cool thing, and he's trying to steer all these people. I think you can teach the skill, but there's a responsibility with the skills we have to use them wise, especially if you're a believer. There's a responsibility to do it in a respectful and honoring way. And so I think that's the hardest thing in the whole media movie industry for believers. And sometimes, you're surprised when you learn that an actor or an actress is a follower of Christ, because you judge them by the roles that they've played. And so everybody has to kind of figure out what is the line here for me? What do I feel is appropriate? And I don't know what your theory on all that is, but man, there's a lot of theories out there. You have anything to say about that?
Yeah, I grew up in a very separate Christian subculture, and kind of the denomination that I grew up in was very like everything in the world, like not everything, but like very much against things of the world, very much against like even going to the movie theaters or listening to a lot of pop music and stuff. And I kind of moved away from that after I became an adult and realized like, oh, there's more. Christianity can be more than just this one denomination, or just like how this church structures certain rules. And I think a lot of things, obviously we want to use wisdom, and we want to use, cautiousness with everything. There's bad things about the internet. There's bad things like, that we can come across. And I think spending too much time in it. For example, porn is extremely harmful, and it's kind of all over the internet. And as believers, we're very cautious to protect ourselves against it and to stay away from it. And especially if you have kids, like, and you're a Christian, you should be thinking about, okay, how am I going to teach my kids how to live in this digital age where there's all this coming at us that is from the enemy. So there's things like that we want to protect ourselves against. But I don't believe that God's called us to kind of like just go in our own Christian huddle and go back to the Little House on the Prairie days, even though we want to. We're in this world. There's this music, there's this culture, there's these movies around us. For us, we have to figure out, first of all, what's our individual purpose? Like, what's our calling as individuals and as a family, and like, where are we headed? Where are we going to make the impact? Sure, there's temptations and struggles, and maybe as you grow as a YouTuber or creative, there's temptations, maybe just pride and just like getting the focus so on yourselves. But you have to learn to live and walk in the Spirit and follow Christ and decide, okay, this is my calling, this is what I'm going to do, and this is what I'm going to do to avoid evil, whether that's seeing things that are inappropriate, whether that's just pride or inward struggles. But one thing that I realized, like, especially as I became an adult and realized like that Christianity was more than just a set of rules, and more than just don't do this and don't go here and don't see this because you might encounter evil. I just realized like there's a lot of, including myself, a lot of screwed up people in the world. There's a lot of people that might not use the same language of a pastor would use. And there's, if you're going to go in the world, you're going to hear words that you might find kind of inappropriate for your kids to hear, right? But I think as leaders and as we have to be like, okay, this is not what we believe, and this isn't how we should live. But there's no way that we can go around and not see it unless we really build our own community and live as Little House on the Prairie days without any internet.
When you describe that, I don't think of Little House on the Prairie. You think about that separatist kind of place. I think of The Village. You ever seen that M. Night movie?
I saw like the first 10 minutes, and then it just creeped me out, so I didn't watch the whole thing.
So I feel like from an outside perspective, like from a non-Christian perspective, if they look at separatist community, that's what they're looking at. They're looking at a fear-based, like they're hostage, they're held in. I think that's what outsiders see in that kind of a community. They see this like creepy, like, weird thing. And so I think that kind of reminds me of that image when I hear that. And yeah, we could totally do that. If traditionally, I think it's been called the Christian bubble, right? Like at least amongst Christians, the Christian bubble. And I remember there was a while I wanted to be a musician, right? A Christian musician specifically with Christian music. And I remember someone came to speak at the college I was at. I can't remember who it was. I think she was a Christian artist. And I got to talk to her for a few minutes after her talk or whatever. And I was explaining to her what I was hoping for, what I was wanting to do. And she was like, don't do that. I was like, what? You're doing that? She was like, yeah, but don't do that. She said, go get this book. It's called Roaring Lambs. And it's all about being like fierce, courageous Christians in and out in the world. So don't just seek to create, Christian content. Well, we all know that content can't be, something in itself can't be Christian. Christian it's a person, like a label for a person, not a thing. So you can't have a building can't be Christian. A song can't be truly Christian. It is a song with lyrics about Christ, but it's not strictly Christian. She was just saying, like, don't seek to create strictly Christian things. Be a Christian. And in that, it will flow out into everything you do. And if you're a courageous follower of Christ, you can do that in any place. And we need more courageous followers of Christ in these industries. Don't try to separate yourself and create your own subset of that industry. Be amongst the people and try to influence the people. And so, that's inspired me. One of the things that that we do. You know, I'm a pastor. We planted a church here. We're a digital church at this point. But also, my wife and I started a virtual assistant agency called Dream Support, and we support entrepreneurs, CEOs, business owners who need help, extra help, you know, because they've got so many details in their life. They're trying to figure it all out. They're trying to manage all these things, calendars, email, you know, what have you. And so we get virtual assistants to help them with all those tasks. And so one of the things that I really enjoy about it is it allows me to have influence with people that I would never have influence with as a pastor. They're not trying to engage with a pastor. They're trying to get some help for this other stuff. And so I get to have these great conversations with people who have all kinds of beliefs from all different kinds of backgrounds. There's a one of our clients, his name's Mordecai, right? He's a Jewish guy who's got he's got a podcast called Feeling Full. Mordecai Wiener's his name, and he likes, he says my name like this, Micah, because he does the hard C, and so I call him Mordecai, you know. And so we have these discussions, and when I first talked to him and I first learned his name, I was like, I was just reading about Mordecai this morning. It's so funny I'm talking to you. And so immediately we went into this conversation. Oh yeah, where were you reading that? And I'm like, in Esther in the Old Testament. He's like, oh yeah, okay. So we have this conversation, but you know, we don't exactly see things the same way. And I love that we get to have these conversations, even though that really has nothing to do with the support we provide for him. But there's a relational component. There's another client that I was talking with recently, and we're in the process of trying to find him a match for a virtual assistant. And he was like, I'm really burnt out. I got to unplug for a few days. I'm like, well, that's exactly why we're trying to help you. And you know, he's an interesting guy, but in his burnout, I was able to encourage him and send him a book that helped me recently in trying to find some better balance for my life. It's a book by Michael Hyatt. It's really good. I can't remember the name of it right now, but it was very good. And so I sent him a copy, right? And so I love that I get to have these sort of, you know, the best way I know how to describe it is pastoral moments with these clients that we have as an agency. And those every time I like kind of step out into that kind of let me provide you some help that's separate from what we're talking about. It feels like a risk for our business, for me. But I also feel like God put me in that position for a reason, in that relationship for a reason. So what would you say to the people who are dealing with that feeling of risk? And like they know, man, I could probably have some influence here. I know I could probably not preach, but show my faith in some way. But I feel like if I do that, maybe I'm going to lose some credibility, or maybe I'm going to, you know, hit the wrong nerve.
I think it starts with having a clear conviction and clear like understanding. Oh, okay, what's true in Scripture, and also like having wisdom to know what you stand for. Everything that a Christian might believe isn't necessarily good enough to share on the internet. There's things that Christians. I'm not necessarily saying theological things. I'm saying other things. You know, there might be political beliefs that a Christian has, and the Bible interprets like some of the things that they believe politically. And some Christians feel just compelled to post every single thing that they think and every single perspective they have on the world. And I don't necessarily think that's practically helpful, and I don't necessarily believe that's our ultimate calling. I think there's space for Christian in politics. I think there's space for Christian to address certain things. But when Jesus said what his disciples will be known for, it's by our love. It's not by, you know, how loud we were on Facebook, how many debates we won, how many times we told these people that aren't Christians how terrible of a person they were, or how bad this life they're living is. Really, Jesus said people are going to know us by our love. Now, I genuinely believe that if you're authentic and use wisdom, you're like, okay, this is things that I want to talk about. And these are things I don't need to talk about. It doesn't necessarily help me personally if I post who I voted for in the last election. I don't see it as personally as effective. Some people have their opinions and perspectives on how they do it, maybe tactfully, and I think there's room for that. And there's room for Christians in politics, specifically like when you think of American politics. But I think if you are so focused, if you're known as a person who's always like just posting or talking about things that are not necessarily like apart from what someone cares about that you're trying to reach or helps that person, I think that's a distraction. So I think if you kind of remove all those distractions and you focus on what's most important, and if you have a friend and you build a relationship when you care about that person, they're going to care about you, and they're going to care about, what drives you? Why do you care so much about this? They're going to ask you, hey, why did you start this YouTube channel? Why are you a pastor? So like, I think building some of that curiosity and being extremely intentional about like, oh, this is how I believe I'm called to represent Christ. And I think that's going to lead to those things. So going back to that thing about the fear, like, I don't think necessarily if someone says that they're following Jesus, that's going to lose them from really any business.
Right.
But I think some of the things that are misinterpreted as Christian that can be extremely off-putting to our culture.
I love that you said, what will my disciples be known as? Really breaking it down to that bottom line, or what will they be known for? And their love is so great. It's so great. Well, I think that's a great place to kind of finish up, man. This conversation has been really fun for me, helpful in some ways, and I hope that it helps whoever might find this audio or video. Obviously, you can find it. If you're already listening, you can watch it on YouTube, and if you're on YouTube, you can listen to it on wherever you find your podcasts, From the Garoffice. So thank you so much, Joe, for hanging out with me for a little bit. I really appreciate you taking the time. I hope that your podcast and your business continue to grow and flourish, and that you can continue to impact and create more wonder for people to be asking the right kinds of questions.
Well, thank you so much for having me on, Micah. And I'm sure that a lot of your listeners, viewers were encouraged today.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.